You and I hear all the time that life is short and that we need to be present and live in the moment. I have spent a lot of time really enjoying Stoicism, Seneca, the Marcus Aurelius papers, and it really helps you kind of, you, I would say, mentally to have the leap and the armor on your mind and your heart to deal with some very extreme situations. And I have been very grateful that I ever found those writings. And I want to share with you today kind of an exercise that I did with myself where I looked at death from two different lenses. And the benefit for you by taking this type of, I would say, an approach is maybe you'll discover certain things that you want to do now in life that are important to you. Maybe you'll see things when if you look at it from a longer term plan, you might adjust when you do certain behaviors. How do you save money? How do you spend time with family? How do you look at your hobbies and things that you're doing professionally and personally? And so, this is a conversation for those that want to have the most meaning out of their life, that are worried that time is slipping by, that they have lived their best life already and there's nothing in front of them. And this struck me very home. And I want to kind of share because today my neighbor passed away. And while life and death is normal and you should expect that, what was troubling here is that a month ago, his wife wasn't feeling well. And so his death over the last few days was very sudden, right? Like she was expected to be the one that would pass first, then him. And instead, the roles reversed. And what this really, I would say, tells us and hits me is you can't plan, and we know this, you can't plan death. You can't plan life. You have to live it because death appears when it's your time. And obviously, accidents in the world and the universe, however you look at it, at the end of the day, you have your life and that breath in your body right now. Does that mean you should live as if there is no tomorrow and maybe encourage higher injuries or maybe not save enough money so that you can kind of afford your life and afford and pay for the things that you need in later ages? No, of course not. But what it does mean is that let's look at life and death, and then let's live our life and actually live it with the concept and the framework on what if I were to die tomorrow? What if I were to die next year? And then conversely, and this was my exercise, I looked at it from a very short term, near term, as in next year, and then what if you live 50 more years? 50 more years for me is double my life. And that would be a huge blessing, and I would be super grateful for it. And when I look at it from these two lenses, first off, what it does is when you look at it from the short term, and I encourage you to look at it from the short term, would you call your parents? Would you visit your parents? Would you visit your sister? I would, and I have been. Um, would you still watch that show that you've been binge watching for the third time? Or would you write a letter to friends? Or would you pursue that hobby you have been waiting to make time for? Or maybe to experience horseback riding because you've always wanted to as a kid and never had the chance. You see, I want us to frame our lives on the near term. What if we were to die tomorrow? What if we were to die in 6 months? And then write up what would you change? Like what are you waiting for in some things? And then do it at the long term, the 50-year mark, if you're so lucky. If you're in your 20s, maybe that's even 70 years, which is a huge blessing. But when you look at it from that lens, you might say, well, from the near term, I still want to do those things because that really could be my life. Next year, I could pass away, and I should take advantage of, to do those things that are not very high monetarily and would be very fulfilling. I'd feel grateful. I would have no regrets knowing that I saw that, I did that, I tasted that. But when we look at it from a long term, this is where life gets interesting. Suddenly you look at it, well, maybe I will get married again. Maybe I will find love. Maybe I will get to do that backpack trip. Maybe I should, thinking about your finances, start investing in property. Maybe I should start building that business that I've been wanting to build because I know in 10 years or 30 years it might turn into something meaningful that will support me and others. For me, I was walking around a farm and the farmer who lives right there, he's looking at things from a crop and a harvest. And he raised to me, he said, well, this will be nice. And that we can plant the trees over the next 6 months and then be able to harvest them in 20 years. And we could do that a couple times. And I actually had to correct him and say, I would love to do that a couple times, but I believe I only probably have 2 harvests in my life available, right? Because if it takes 20 years for the trees and the crops to grow to be available and viable, that's just 2 crops. That's 40 years. I won't be able to see the 3rd harvest. It'd be a blessing if I did, but it'd be very unusual. And that struck him. He was like, oh, okay, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And so when you think about it and you frame it that way, and you look at your investments and you look at your behaviors, suddenly you start to walk things out a little differently, right? So if I were to be with him on this farm and get to have that joy of growing things and seeing something develop like that, yes, the trees for the 20-year span would be amazing. Maybe another 20. But are there other things that we can do together where I'd be able to see at the beginning through the end? Because I, as a person, love to see the completion of things. I won't be able to see the completion of everything. That's impossible. But when you reflect on the things that you're looking at pursuing in your life, when you look at the long term, start mapping it out. This is a 20-minute exercise. This is not an all day or building spreadsheets. Just kind of craft out, what are you looking at? What are you seeing? Then do the same thing for the near term, for dying in 6 to 12 months. And I know it can be depressing for some, but it is important that we tackle this because it will uncover what you really value. What I really valued came out in that paperwork and in that just the discovery process. And this is what I did. And I encourage you to do the same. I would love to hear from you. Just in the comments, let me know if you approach this differently, because I would love to improve on how I did it and what I can do and what I can look forward to. I took both, and then I created a new timeline, my life, where I put in a lot of those, what if I die next year, put a lot of those practices in place. I put a lot of commitments to me to go do it, go ride the horse, go do those things. But I also noticed, if I have enough time in my life to find a soulmate, to get married, to find love, why am I looking at it from the long term as, okay, now it's a potential, but not on the short term? So what I did is I started rolling in some of those long-term possibilities into more current behaviors. And I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy because when you look at it from a 50-year time frame, you would say, well, of course you'd be able to find a soulmate and a love. Well, then so it's possible in 6 to 12 months too. So why would you not try? Valid. Right? Suddenly the fear of commitment in relationships goes away. And this is one example. Here's the other thing, the counter list. You see, when I did What If I Die in 6 to 12 months, suddenly I saw and thought of things that I really didn't care about. I didn't like how I was spending my time. It wasn't that it was a waste of time, but if I only had 6 to 12 months, those things didn't feel like the priorities they felt like that morning. And they certainly weren't going to serve me in my 50-year plan. And so I used the I want to remove these from my life because they're not going to serve me, and I put them also on my timeline. Not to include, but to bring awareness to them that they don't serve me. They might be interesting, and you know, maybe it's your job. Maybe it's not a hobby. If you love it, you should keep it. But maybe it's your job, and maybe it's your profession. Maybe it's how you spend your time with your kids. Maybe you realize that you're spending too much time consuming social media or watching TV too much, and then that is actually robbing you of a valuable time with those that you have now seen and desire to be around. So here's an example for you. If you think about the average time someone watches or consumes media, it's between 2 and 4 hours a day. TV, mindless consumption, not learning, mindless consumption. TV shows, binge watching, YouTube, social media, TikTok, all of those things capture our attention and we don't recognize, but they do accumulate. And when you add it up, if you literally only spend 2 hours a day, that's 14 hours a week. Do the math. Take a year using 14 hours a week on television. You're going to discover very quickly, as I did, that I'm giving up years of my life on something that I would probably say this very second I did not value. Wouldn't you rather have dinner with a friend, get coffee with your mother, go watch your kid do a dance or a show, or just walk along the beach? You see, when we measure our time against an absolute line, we're going to die in 6 months, we're going to die in 50 years, it brings clarity to things that we really care about. And things are going to come and go. And there's no judgment here, right? If you love theater and television and movies, that's fantastic. But you'll validate that with this process. You'll know how much you're really giving to it, right? And maybe it's you love the theater, so you want to go see things live. You might start expanding your consumption to beyond programmed viewing and social media viewing to things that are other categories. My neighbor died today. The funeral was today. The wake was outside. And this week, the energy has been different, right? I guess it's the passing of someone nearby. And it really struck me the switch. They've been married together for a very long time. And it really troubled me, right? One was prepared for the other to die, and then they switched places, right? Life is a blessing. You are a blessing. I'm asking you to measure what you do, take 20 minutes, reflect on it, and then make the life that you have. I pray we all have a lot of time. Make the life that we have count to doing the things that you want to do and you enjoy. That's the greatest reward in life. That's how we honor this gift of life that we have today. Let me know in the comments if you approach a different way or what you're going to do differently. What are you adding to your life and what are you taking away? That's what I'm asking. Help me motivate you, help you motivate me, inspire each other, and let's just do better in our days that we have together. Thank you so much. Again, my daughter asked that at the end of these videos, I share a fact. And this was one from Pamplona, Spain. And so if you've read any classics, that is a kind of a key city for bull running with the bulls. And in this event, you are trapped in an alley, if you will, and bulls run and you run in front of them. And if you are lucky and you get to the side on time, or you run faster than a bull, which would be impressive, then the bulls run by you and you chase them into the Coliseum. And then they take the bulls away. And when I did this, I'd only read about it. I'd never seen anything about it. I knew people got hurt. I did not know people died. And so went to Spain, went to Pamplona, got in, was out all night, as was customary for those events. At 8 something in the morning, you get in the road. It's like maybe it's a couple 100 meters, right? It's not very far, and the bulls are on one end of the street, and it goes kind of like a pattern all the way to the Coliseum. And you're getting there, and you're walking around. Literally, the city officials are walking around saying, "Do you know you could die today?" And that started to sink in a little bit, and I was kind of getting a little nervous. But I was like, "Oh, I'm pretty fit. I'm a young man, so I must be vulnerable." And then they started raising these walls, these like 8 and 10 foot walls that you were not getting through. And they started putting walls and walls and walls. And what they told you is this: they said, "Look, when this event starts, when they release the bulls, we are not opening these fences, these walls, for any reason until the bulls are gone." And they were serious. At 3, 2, 1, bulls were released. They came stampeding down. I ran as hard as I could, and as I'm running, all I see is the dark heads in front of me, right? Because all the back of the heads. We're all running as hard as we can, but you have to run with your hand out like this, because what's happening is people are pushing you, and you're running over shoes, and it's loud, and there's people screaming, right? Because like there is literally a pack of bulls that are 1,000 pound plus easy with very sharp, horns coming at us, and we're running really hard and kind of got like this, and you're kind of working your way around, and you can kind of feel the energy. The ground is shaking as they're hitting the cobblestones. They're coming at us, and so I juke to the side. And as I come to the side, there's literally 3, 4 people deep on this wall. And so I'm like pushing myself against the wall, and like they're pushing me away because they feel like I'm like crushing them. So they're trying to protect themselves. I'm trying to push on there because literally the bulls run right by me. Thank God. They ran by me. Didn't hit me, but they were close. But like the sensation of fighting for your life in this position, and everybody's on their own. Nobody cares about anybody else. Like nobody was like trying to pull me in and keep me close. Or they weren't running. They weren't trying to pick people up. They were literally running for their life. So what do you do after now your adrenaline is really spiked and these animals just charged you? Well, it appears, and I learned this, that we chase after them. Because we're chasing them to the Coliseum. Well, we did that. And as we're running, we're getting closer and closer to the Coliseum. Suddenly, all those dark heads become white. And I'm running, I recognize and realize suddenly, as everybody else near me does, that they're not running away anymore. Those people are running back. Right? And so suddenly you feel like you're in this apocalyptic spirit where you now have to turn around and run the other way. Because they're all coming at you and they're going to run you down. And then like we kind of did this back and forth, we turn away, kind of the crowd was feeling it. And as we went forward again, we learned and saw blood everywhere. Like literally blood was everywhere. Clothes, shoes, and some guy, they had opened the gates and you could see they dragged on the blood into the side where the medics were. And we kept running now, and we're seeing what's going on is that one of the bulls, the black bull, they were all, many different colors, but the one giant black bull, he had got separated, and he was turning around. And that's literally the worst thing. So these people with these big sticks are trying to encourage him to go, but he was on his own. Like, he made his choice which way he wanted to go. Took one guy, spun him around, basically spun him naked, like totally destroyed some of his organs. And that guy was the first guy of the season to really have some critical injuries. Thankfully, the rest of us all made it into the Coliseum, and all the bulls were put back into their areas. No bulls died. They do the horrible bullfights in the evening, but when I was done, I could feel the energy, and I reflected on it, and I was like, that was a terrible idea. Like, I literally could have died, and everybody there could have died, and everybody was fighting for their life, man, it was crazy. So, story I'm sharing is I went to go running with the Bulls in Pamplona, Spain. And the reason I went is I told my friend who was getting married, I said, hey, for your bachelor party, we should go to Spain and run with the Bulls. And he said, I'm not doing that, but you should do that. And that's when I booked my ticket. And one, it exposed me to this whole world that I didn't know existed. This fear, this crowd energy, and then just this experience that I would never give up, but I would definitely never recommend because the opportunity for really getting messed up was so high. And so when I think about what this video has been about and what this audio has been about, what this story today has been about of around death, near term and long term, those are one of those moments where you might have said, I'd like to go experience that. Maybe you want to go climb mountains. Maybe you want to scuba dive with sharks. But if you have an extreme fiber in your body, I would encourage you to apply it and use it. But also, as I do now in reflection, that was a really bad idea. So, when we're making our lists, let's not do things that are high probability of not making it, but find things that are good for our heart and our soul. And yeah, so that's my story. Hope you enjoyed it.